Welcome to Coach Bennett's podcast, where every run has a purpose, where kindness is hardcore, where this is about running, and this is not about running, where every starting line is a finish line in disguise, where rambling still gets you where you need to be, where pineapple will never ruin your pizza, and the sodas, adult and not adult kind, are always cold, and where there is room on the starting line for everybody. I'm Coach Bennett. Thank you for letting me be a part of your day. Let's get started. Welcome to episode 71 of Coach Bennett's podcast. That's right, 71. 71. I had to look up what number this is because we're at that point where I've lost track. It's a lot like birthdays. You know how like early on, you know what birthday's coming up for yourself. You know, like you're 10, double digits, baby. Let's go. 13, you're a teenager. Sweet 16, 18, you get to go to jail and vote. A lot of cool stuff happening there. There's 21, which at least in the United States is a big deal for some reason. I can't really remember. You know, there's 30, 40, you know, so I've heard 50 is a big deal. But I think as I get older, the numbers have less meaning and the birthday has more meaning. So in the past, it was like, I'm going to get presents. All eyes are going to be on me. Isn't this cool? It's less of that now. I don't really care too much about the number of the birthday. I care more about kind of how I get to take stock on my birthday. I get to look back a little bit. I get to look ahead. And I get to kind of embrace the moment. And this is not an episode about birthdays. It's just episode 71 that is actually going to be about racing and being your best on race day. I'm not exactly sure what the title's going to be. I thought it might be how to race your best or racing your best or how to be your best on race day. I don't know right now. I just know that it's going to be about racing and it's going to be about being your best while you're racing on race day, and how you can put it all together on race day. That's what it's going to be about. So this is an episode that, yes, like so many other episodes, makes sense to have right now. Why? I'll tell you why. There's a lot of racing going on right now. Oh yeah, the fall is heating up. I mean, not literally, it's starting to actually cool off here in the Pacific Northwest, and it's been gorgeous lately. I don't want to put any kind of, hex on our gorgeous weather. We usually get gorgeous weather until the end of October, and then it's just rainy and dreary for about 8 straight months. And I'm sure if you've listened to the podcast during that period of time, you notice that I probably sound a little dreary at times. That's just human nature, seasonal, moods. It's a real thing. But right now it's gorgeous. But cross country is in full swing. I'm heading to Chicago this weekend because the Chicago Marathon is going on this weekend, and I get to cheer people on and give high fives and hugs and tell everybody that I'm proud of them and meet people and celebrate with people. So I'm super excited because anytime I'm at a race, whether it's a road race, a marathon, whether it's cross-country track and field, I feel so good about humanity when I'm around runners, so many runners that are putting themselves in a position to try and be as great as they can be, to try their best. And they are surrounded by supporters, people that believe in them, are inspired by them, that are motivated by them. Oh, I love race day. And then there's the butterflies. I get butterflies even when I'm not racing and I don't have any athletes racing, because I know that the athletes have butterflies and their supporters have butterflies, and then there's just extra butterflies flying around and they flutter into your chest, and you're just so excited and the endorphins kick in and you just feel good about humanity and you want everyone to be their best and you want to support them as best as you can. Anyway, I'm obviously excited about this weekend, and I thought, you know what? Let's just talk about racing. Let's talk about being our best. And I'll tell you what, even though you don't need to hear it, this is about running, and this is absolutely, positively, most definitely not about running. You can take out that term race day and you can plug in big interview or hard conversation or presentation, exam, test, you name it. You can plug it in there because the same attributes of what, you have when you have a great race and what you did to make sure you gave your best, you can translate those very easily to anything else that fits the bill of a situation where you're trying to be your best, where you're putting yourself in a position where, guess what? There's the possibility of failure, but there's also the possibility of success. That you've put in the time, the work, the effort to try and do something extraordinary. Well, it doesn't have to be a race, okay? So I just want you to know that. Now, before we get in, I'm just going to tell you a couple of cool things that, I could say they have something to do with the episode. They don't really have anything to do with the episode. I'm just kind of throwing this stuff out there because, I actually can make it about race day and being your best. So I'm going to tie this together somehow. But I just want to tell you, I'm reading 2 books right now. I'm kind of on like a reading frenzy. I was in a little bit of a lull. I'm always reading a fiction book and a nonfiction book, always. But I was kind of just slogging through the last couple of books I've been reading. Not because they weren't good books. For whatever reason, I was just going through a period where the reading it was difficult. Maybe my concentration wasn't that good. Maybe I was spending too much time on my computer, which does not help you focus and concentrate, by the way. So, little public service announcement. If you are doing something in your life, whether it's studying or reading, for fun or for work or anything like that, or if you have anything in your life that's calling for your attention and some focus and concentration, screwing around on your phone doesn't help. I'm not one of those people that's like, you got to cut out social media. You don't have to cut out social media. You don't have to do that. You don't have to stop playing on your phone. I will tell you this. It doesn't aid you. It doesn't help you when it's time to put it down and start concentrating. I have found, and from the people I've spoken to, it seems like they have found the same thing. And from what I've read, because I thought, let's see if this is just me or if this is actually real. Just spending an egregious amount of time screwing around on your phone just messes you up. You know what I mean? And I'm not just talking about messes you up if you start like engaging with trolls and people like that. Like, don't engage with trolls. By the way, trolls, they live for your attention. That's their oxygen, is your attention. And if you starve them of your attention, they die. You know what I mean? They just can't survive without your eyeballs on them. But if you expand this out, it's kind of just think about the time you're spending screwing around on your phone. That is a way for you to relax. And then when it gets to a point where you don't need it anymore, there are other things you can do that I think will relax you even more, will help you well beyond what an extra hour on your phone would be. For me, that's reading. So I started using my phone less, still use it, but I'm using it less, and I'm reading 2 books right now. One is by Hunter Thompson, who's one of my favorite authors, Tales of Shame and Degradation in the 80s, and Little Heaven by Nick Cutter, which is really good. Reminds me of Stephen King. So if you like Stephen King, I think you're going to like Little Heaven by Nick Cutter. I'll put up links to both of these. I'm watching The Penguin on Max, which is an offshoot of The Batman, which came out with Robert Pattinson. I think it was like 2 years ago. It's fantastic. Colin Farrell's in it. It's a drama, but it is good. So you may be thinking, I'm not into the whole superhero thing. If I didn't tell you that this was tied to the Batman, you would not know it was a superhero comic book type of show. There's nothing in it that is like that. It's like almost like a mob drama. But anyway, The Penguin, fantastic. And then I saw a documentary, Will and Harper, about Will Ferrell and Harper Steele and the road trip they took, these 2 great friends, Will Ferrell and his friend Harper Steele, who I believe transitioned within like the 2 years of the road trip across the country. Unbelievable. Outstanding. That's on Netflix. So the point of me bringing some of these things up is, I'm just going to throw this out there. If you have something you're working on, if you have a goal that you're driving towards, if there's some type of a challenge that you're dedicating a lot of your time to, that's important to you, it is incredibly important also to have things in your life that have nothing to do with that other pursuit. I am not one of those coaches that say you have to dedicate 100% of your life to focusing on this epic pursuit you're on. In fact, I think it's better if you have significant parts of your life that are not dedicated to that pursuit, but are not something that's hindering you accomplishing the goal you're setting out to. So when I say, have things in your life that are not dedicated to the pursuit of your goal, I'll give you an example. If I was running the Chicago Marathon this weekend, I would be so utterly thankful that I have these 2 books, because there's some downtime during marathon weekend. And not only that, well, there should be some downtime, but I'm going to make sure there's downtime because I have 2 books I am absolutely loving to read. And when I'm reading Little Heaven by Nick Cutter, which is kind of like a scary horror thriller book, I'm not thinking about mile 15. I'm not thinking about 30K of the marathon. I'm thinking about how are they going to get out of this, and I'm terrified. My mind is off the race, okay, which you need. You need that time where it's not only focused on the race. Think of it as recovery for your brain. You can't run all day long, every single day, and think you're going to get better at running. That's just not how it works. Okay? Not only is there a law of diminishing returns, eventually you get negative returns. It's the same thing mentally. If all you're thinking about is the race, then eventually you're getting less return. If there are moments to think about it, to do some visualization, to be thinking about the course, to be planning out the week, to be planning out race day, to think about your competition, fine, that's great. Then you've got to back off. And you've got to recover. So it could be documentaries like Baseball by Ken Burns. I'm a nerd. I get it. I love documentaries. But this thing is 20-something hours long. I'm on the final documentary episode of it. I think I've got an hour and a half left in this. It's been a godsend for me because I've been doing a lot of work. And this is how I take a break. I also love baseball and I love basketball. And the WNBA playoffs are on right now. And the Major League Baseball playoffs are on as well. And these are things that take my mind off the work I'm doing. It's the same thing where you need to find things in your life, passions in your life, people in your life that can take up your time so you can recover from this great pursuit that you're on. Maybe a marathon, could be cross-country season. It could be your pursuit of getting a doctorate in something. That's up to you to decide. The point is, have things in your life that aid in your recovery, your emotional recovery and your mental and mindful recovery. It's very easy to talk to runners about your physical recovery and talk about the need to fuel and to hydrate, to get sleep, to ice if you need to get a massage. The second you start telling runners they need to bring things into their life that will aid in emotional, mental, and mindful recovery, a lot of you all get weird. And I think it's because that part is hard for you to do, to really take care of yourself emotionally and mindfully. But guess what? You're a runner. You take on hard things all the time. So I have no doubt that you can figure out how to take care of yourself even better than you already do, mentally, mindfully, and emotionally. And sometimes it's just curling up with a good book or watching a great show or, yes, screwing around on your phone for a little bit. All right? So let's get into episode 71, How to Race Your Best, or a totally different title that I'm going to make up later. Now, this is something that I think you can revisit. If it's the reason why I'm saying this, you can revisit it, is because this isn't just for someone who's running the marathon. I know this week is the Chicago Marathon, and then Philadelphia Marathon's coming up, and we just had Berlin, and you've got New York coming up, and then suddenly there's the spring marathons. You've got Tokyo, and you've got London, and I get it. I understand it. So a lot of people think like, oh, this is just for something that's like a one-off race that you have every couple months. No, this is something you can do if you're someone who's in the midst of a cross-country season, like I said, and you're racing once every 2 weeks or once every 10 days. This is something that you can incorporate into your life where it's just a part of your rhythm of the season. And the way I like to start is by establishing a foundation when we talk about racing. Because initially, athletes will suddenly say, I want to run X time. That's what they lead with. I say, what's your goal? I want to break 5 hours in the marathon. I want to break 3:30 in the marathon. I want to run 18 minutes this weekend at the cross-country course. And I say, okay, we're getting ahead of ourselves. I don't want to talk about your time, okay? Because if we don't talk about what I want to talk about first, we're not even going to be able to get to what you want to talk about. So I'm sorry. I know this is really all about you, but I'm going to need to tell you what you need to hear before I tell you what you want to hear. And what we need to do is establish a baseline of effort here, okay? Without any discussion of your time goal. And what I mean by the establishment of a baseline of your effort, what I'm saying is we're going to agree that you're going to try your best. It doesn't matter what your time goal is unless you agree that if we're going to compete, if we're going to race. Now, this is different than like what I like to do sometimes, which is show up at like a 5K and run it for fun. You know, I'm going to go out there. I'm going to have a fun time. Like, I'm out there really because I want to hear some people cheering. I want to give some high fives. I want to get a bagel at the end of the race. Yes, in the United States, we hand out bagels at the end of the race. It's always funny to me because every time I say that, I'll get people from around the world that will say, what are you talking about? People hand you bagels when you cross a finish line? And I say, yes, they do. And a lot of times people will say, that's ridiculous. And I say, well, what do they hand you? And a lot of times they'll say a beer or a medal. And I'm like, those are pretty cool too. Because I don't ever really eat the bagel now that I think about it, you know? I will grab a drink for sure, but it's usually like a water or something like that. I always grab a banana. I end up grabbing a couple oranges. It's as if I'm like shopping in the produce section. I always grab too much stuff, you know? But anyway, the point is we're establishing a baseline under the assumption that you're racing, trying to race to your potential, to be your best, to give your best effort. So if we go to that, you're going to lead by usually telling me what you think a time is that represents your best effort. Screw the time. I just want to talk about you committing to the foundation of our race plan, all right? Our top race goal is you're going to try your best. You're going to give your best because I don't know how the race is going to go. You may bring up these times, and I may know you're fit enough to do these times. But here's the thing. We have to know the context of the environment before we start saying, yes, you may be fit enough to break 5 hours in the marathon, but because of the situation that we're going into, you're not going to. I'll give you an example. Boston a few years ago when it was sleeting 35 degrees with wicked winds. And I got to say wicked winds because it's in Boston. And they go, it's wicked. The winds were wicked. All right, relax, grab your Dunkin' Donuts, chill out. And you're more than welcome to join the Yankees bandwagon because I know that your Red Sox didn't make the playoffs. I'm sorry. I didn't need to go there, but I kind of sort of needed to go there. Don't bring up the Celtics. All right. So the point is we don't know, or I should say I don't know, what the environment is going to be like on race day. The pacing may get screwed up, right? The course may get screwed up. The wind may be in your face the entire time. The weather, like I said, may be crappy. It may change. It may be beautiful at first, and then it may get crappy. There's all sorts of things that can occur. None of those things, though, have anything to do with whether or not you can give your best. None of those things have anything to do with whether or not you can try your best. They do have something to do with the likelihood, the potential, or even if there's a shot for you to race your fastest you've ever run or hit your time goal that you're going for. So Let's start with something that no matter what, we can control. That no matter what the situation is that we show up on race day heading into, we know you can accomplish this. How cool is that? Here's something we know without a doubt you can accomplish. Because I never know on the starting line if an athlete is going to achieve the time goal. I may know that they have the fitness, like I said, to achieve it. But there's so much that goes on in a race that is out of our control that we have to take into account on the starting line and realize, yes, you're capable of doing it. It doesn't mean you're going to do it. You could run a fantastic race, a brilliant race, an unbelievably strategic perfection of a race and not hit the time goal. Okay, that doesn't mean we had a failure of a race, does it? No. But I like heading in there saying, let's just foundationally say, no matter what, whether the pacing screws up, whether the weather's terrible, whatever, you get a side stitch for 2K and that screws up your time, whatever. We're going to handle the side stitch as best as we can. We're going to race as best as we can. We're going to give the best possible effort we can. Start with that. And I'll tell you what, I'm not going to guarantee it, but I will say there's an incredible likelihood you're going to relax. Oh yeah, when you start with a time goal, that's daunting. It's a lot of stress. It's a lot of tension. It can be one of your goals. I have no problem with that. I mean, I'm a track and running coach. I mean, of course a time goal is going to be a part of so many of your goals. I just don't think it should be the top one. The top one should be, I'm going to race my best. I'm going to give my best effort. I'm going to try my best. Let that be number one, and I'm telling you, you're suddenly going to realize, like, wait, how long have my shoulders been up around my ears? Because you're going to relax and they're going to drop, okay? So let's establish that baseline. You're going to try your best. Then what I want you to do is come up with a race plan, but this is what you need to do. You don't just come up with a race plan willy-nilly and say, like, all right, I'm going to do this. It's wait, calm down. Calm down. First of all, what race are you doing? Let's talk about that. Because race plans change depending on the race. There's a different race plan with a 5K than there is with a marathon. All right? So what's the race that you're doing? Start there. Take some time. Think about it. 42.2K is different than 1.5K, which is that beautiful 1,500-meter metric mile race, right? Okay. Who are you competing with? Right? Who are you competing with? Is this a time trial where you're alone? I mean, we go back to COVID. People ran some of their greatest races on their own. Virtual races. Solo. But that's a different race plan, isn't it? Than if you're running with 30 people or 300 people or 30,000 people. So who are you competing with? Right? And those people around you at the starting line, that's going to play a part in your race plan as well. It's one thing to be in a crowd of 300 people on a very big road. It's another thing to be in a crowd of 30,000 people on a very big road. But these are, again, things that you're not, digging into deeply right away. It's just acknowledging them because we're going to come up with a race plan based on the answers to all of these once we know the answer to all of these questions. Where are you competing? Believe me, this is important. Where are you competing? Are you competing at sea level? Are you competing at 4,000 feet? Are you competing at 8,000 feet? Is it a course? Are you racing somewhere that's pancake flat? Are you racing somewhere that's very hilly? It has undulations. Or are you racing somewhere that's going to be hot and humid? Are you racing somewhere that's only going to be hot? Are you racing somewhere that's going to be very, very chilly? Are you racing somewhere that has extreme temperature changes in a short amount of time? This is important. Where are you running? Because running a marathon in hot and humid weather is very different than running a marathon in very chilly weather. Running a 1,500 in very chilly weather is very different than running a 1,500 in hot and humid weather. There are different things. Is it going to be very windy? Is it typically very windy there? Where are you running? Is it in a city? Is it in a rural setting? Where are you competing? Is it in a stadium? Is it on a road? Like these are the things that you just want to think about. Again, we're kind of just making a stew for this first question. We're just throwing all this stuff in there, and then we're going to figure out what we got, and we're going to figure out how we need or what we need to eat up this stew. You know what I mean? How we need to eat this stew? No, we know how we're going to eat it. We need to know what we're like. Is it best with a spoon or a fork? Now, I don't know about you. I'm a spoon stew guy. All right? Tammie, Coach Bennett the Greater, she's a fork stew girl. I don't get it. I want the spoon. I want some of the broth in there. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not eating stew with a fork. There should be a good amount of broth. I'm getting off track here. Okay. And when are you competing? When are you competing? What time of year are you competing? What time of day are you competing? All of these things are going to factor in. I was just at a cross-country meet in Washington, about an hour north of Seattle, I guess it was, last weekend. And the final races are run in more or less the dark. The final race, I should say, is run in the dark. And there's some lighting. Not a lot, but there's some lighting. Now, those last athletes that ran in that final race, okay, so that 200 plus kids who ran in that final race, it was really dark. The race before it, which was only half an hour earlier, was really like twilight. There was some sun that was fighting to stay above, kind of the line and give them what they needed so they could see where they were going. So they didn't have to rely on the artificial lights. That last race, it got really dark, really fast. Those are two very, very different races. I was talking to someone afterwards, and I said, okay, the second to last race was about 15 seconds faster, I would say. And what I meant by that was the final race, if you ran, I'm making up a time, 18 minutes, to me, that would be the equivalent of a 17:45 in the race before. Because it costs you about 15 seconds navigating in the dark. You're not as aggressive. You also cannot really read the pace the right way, or I shouldn't say the right way. You read the pace differently in a dark run than you do in a light run. Just think about nighttime when you're running. A lot of times you come back and you're like, I was rolling, and then you look at your pace and you're like, what's that? And it's because it's really difficult to measure pace during the night, during a dark run, the same way that you would during a light or a day run. All right, so those kids who ran that last race in the dark, they probably thought they were running faster than they were because it was hard to gauge where they were running, where their feet were landing, all of those measurements that you take for granted, in the day. So that's what I'm talking about. When are you running? What time of day are you running? What time of year are you running? All right, because that's obviously going to help you answer some other questions about weather and things like that. So once you've done that, we have context for really the situation that you're in, who you're running against, where you're running, what kind of a race is it, how long is it, what is the course like, all of these things. Then we can finally develop a race plan. We can start to think about the tactics and the strategy once we know where, who, and what you're doing. And all that stuff. Like we have to get those things in there. Don't just say, I'm going to do this. No, you're not just going to do this. You need to know where you're just going to do this. You need to know when you're going to try to just do this. And you need to know who else is around and competing with you when you're trying to do this. All right? Now, once you've got all this, you know that race, you know where it's going to be, you know who you're running against, all right? What I want you to do is finally, you can start to think about if you want. And again, not everyone has this in their kind of goals, but I'm going to start with it. Your place or your pace. So in cross country, for instance, how you do in large part is based on your place. It's not so much a time thing because every single course is so dramatically different. I will tell you this about marathons. It's the same thing. I don't know why all of you think because you ran 3:59 in a marathon in one city that it translates to 3:59 in a marathon in another city when they're two totally different courses over 42.2K. But I'm not going to talk about that right now because I'll get really hot and bothered, and that's not what this is about. But anyway, the point is I want you to think about place or pace. Now you can start thinking about it. What place are you looking to get? Maybe you're trying to be top 100 in your age group in the local 10K, or maybe you're trying to be first team All-State in cross country, or you're trying to be top 10,000 in the Chicago Marathon. I don't know. Maybe it's pace. Maybe you're in a race and you say, you know what, I do want to break 5 hours in the marathon, or 4 hours in the marathon, or 3 hours in the marathon. Or maybe this is a course I've run at a couple of times in cross country, and I've gotten close, but I've never gone under 18 or 17 or 16 or 20 minutes in the 5K, whatever it is that you want to do. But you know that course, you've been there before. The time makes sense because it's based on something, and not just my training says I should do this, even though I've never run there and I don't even know what the course looks like. So there's a little bit of due diligence you need to do. Or maybe it is track and field, and you're running an 800 and you say, I want to break 2 minutes for the first time. Or it's a 2 mile, or I should say 3K to make this a little bit more global. And you're saying, I want to break 12 minutes in the 3K for my first time ever, or 10 minutes in the 3K for my first time ever, and my training has led me to believe that this is what I'm capable of doing. Fine, you have those pace goals. You have those place goals. Now, the next step here are your grace goals. We've got place, we've got pace, now we've got grace. Because here's the thing. There is always some upside to your goal. That's right. A good goal should have some upside. And the reason why I say that is because if your goal has no upside, then what you're doing is you're saying, my goal is to be at 100% of my potential. Well, okay, I get that, but it's really difficult to race at 100% of your potential when it comes to time. You can race at 100% of your potential by effort, without a doubt, with intelligence, without a doubt. But time, like I said, has so many factors you can't control. All right? So if you set a goal of this is 100%, all right, and the pacing is off a little bit because the rabbit screws up, or on one of the turns in track, you're running straight into like a 15, 25 mile an hour wind. All right, that's going to cause some issues. That's going to cause some problems. You can still run to 100% of your potential. You may not hit your time goal because guess what? 100% of your potential, where you have to run into a wind of 25 miles an hour, you're not hitting your potential. You have to fight and give more energy to running into that wind than you normally would, which means 100% of your potential has to be in perfect conditions when you're thinking of potential being a time, not an effort. So when you set your goal, it's not about I'm trying to set a goal where I'm 100% perfect and the conditions are perfect. What you're trying to do is say, I'm setting a place and a pace goal with an element of grace in there, where I know conditions aren't going to be perfect. How do I know that? Because conditions will never be perfect. That's where the grace comes in, okay? So there will always be some upside if you set your goal the right way. I want to break 4 hours in the marathon. Well, does that mean 3:59:59? Because I'll tell you what, if you have the goal set the right way, there's a chance you could run 3:58:32 or 3:57:56 or 3:59:46. There's also a chance that you can run just as great, given the conditions, and run 4 flat 46. You can't tell me that if your goal was to break 4 hours, that you're going to look at 4 hours and 46 as a failure? No. That's in the grace, baby. That means you ran great. You were that close to your goal. We're talking about 1.5 seconds per mile for 26.2 miles. You were off. That's not a lot. I mean, put it another way, that's like saying you were around 0.4 of a second per quarter mile off for over 100 quarter miles. That's nuts. I mean, you can't be telling me that you're going to consider that a failure. No, it's in the grace element of the goal. You've got your place, you've got your pace, you've got your grace. If you're good enough to win a race and you're competing against some great competition, it means you're also good enough to maybe get 3rd, 4th, or 5th, depending on the field, right? Now, what you want to do is make sure that is built in there. Because Once you get off a hard and fast goal, something like, I'm going to try to break 3 hours in the marathon, if you start slipping off that pace, you very easily can say the race is over. And when you do that, you stop competing at your best. You stop trying your best. You stop giving your best because you've given yourself no grace. If you give yourself some grace, you will continue to compete. And remember, the first thing we agreed on was that you were going to try your best. You were going to compete your best. You are going to give your best. That's going to demand that you allow some grace for yourself. I'll also tell you this, from a coaching perspective, if you can continue to give your best and race smart, the times will follow. That's just it. The best racers are the ones who end up racing the best, the most consistently, because they don't quit on themselves. And maybe, more importantly, they don't quit on the race, because things can turn around. I want you to keep that in the back of your mind. Things can turn around. Just like things can take a turn for the worse, which runners have no problem acknowledging, things can turn around for the better if you continue to give your best. But they don't turn around for the better once you've quit. Something to, just tuck that in there, put it somewhere, and remind yourself of that when and if you need it. Okay, now I'm going to do a couple logistics here, all right? Because the race plan thing could be 400 hours long about what is your race plan, how are you going to do it. I can't tell you what your race plan is going to be. You can, and you can work with, if you have a coach or you have teammates, you guys can talk about them. You all can talk about that, all right? You can break down your own race plan. Remember, you want to become your own best coach. How can you take advantage of the course? How can you take advantage of the competition? How can you take advantage of the weather, the situations that you're in, to race your best and give yourself the best opportunity to achieve your goals, whatever they may be, all right? And listen, I mentioned place pace, but there are a lot more goals. It can be, I'm going to run and I'm going to make sure that I'm committed to trying my best. I don't care about my place. I don't care about my pace, which is just as badass a goal. I'm going to commit to give my best. I'm going to commit to running a smart strategy. I'm going to commit to not being a terrible teammate to myself on this run. And guess what? When it could be a race. It could be, I'm going to go out and I'm going to run 10K without stopping for my first time ever. And I'm going to be smart about that. And I'm not going to quit on myself. And I'm going to give my best effort. And I'm going to change my tactics if I need to. And I'm going to shift the strategy if I need to. I'm going to adjust if I need to. And by doing all those things I need to do, I'm hopefully going to have a better chance to achieve what I want to achieve. So, place, pace, but it could be just about anything else, okay? All of them, though, demand some grace. All right, be prepared. Now, what do I mean by that? Be prepared. Obviously, I'm going to take for granted here, and I'm going to allow myself to take for granted that you're going to do the work you need to do to get to the starting line in order to have an opportunity, a chance, a possibility of achieving your goals. Once again, no guarantees on the other side of the starting line other than the fact that there are no guarantees on the other side of the starting line. So I'm taking for granted that you've done the work you need to do. You've owned your fitness. So you're setting goals that are out of reach, but reachable, okay? Out of reach right now because you haven't done it before, but they're reachable. That's my assumption. So when I talk about be prepared, I'm not talking about the training. I'm going to talk about everything else. I'm going to talk about the week ahead, the day of, and I'm talking about things like travel. Prepare for these things. Anticipate these things. It's so important when it comes to running is the anticipation of struggles because you can mitigate so many of those struggles by just being prepared because you've anticipated them. For instance, travel. If you know you're going to be running a destination race or if you know the state championship is going to be in a certain place, prepare for it. And you know how you prepare? You plan ahead. You get that hotel room. You do the due diligence on where the restaurants are and where the supermarkets are, the food stores, where you're able to get things when you need them so you have them when you need them. It's about packing. It's about making sure you have with you what you need to give yourself the best chance of achieving those goals. I am always looking, before I travel to any race, whether it was as a coach or as an athlete, where are the places I can get food for myself or my athletes? Where are the stores I can go to get essentials like waters or energy bars, things like that? Where can I go to get produce like bananas and oranges and apples? Where can I go to get things like peanut butter or almond butter, sunflower butter? Where can I go to get the bagels and the bread? Where can I do these things for the athletes? Where can I go when we inevitably need to find things like contact lens solution or tampons? Where can we go to get these things so when inevitably we need to get them, I can lessen the stress of everyone, including myself, by saying, it's cool, I know where to go. Or guess what? I've already got them. So you want to be prepared by planning ahead. Where are you going? How are you getting there? How long is it going to take? I'll tell you what, here's another place where you put grace. When you're driving somewhere or traveling somewhere, give yourself some extra time. Okay? Because when things get delayed, and there will inevitably, once again, so many inevitabilities, there will be delays. There will be traffic. There's going to be delays on the runway. There's the train's going to be late. All this stuff is going to happen. Don't cut corners by cutting things too close. Make sure you're prepared by giving yourself the time and the grace to get there in time, gracefully, if you know what I mean. So these are things you can do way ahead of time. There are other things, like a day ahead of the race. Think about what a stress-free day would be like. Well, it would probably be knowing where you're going to get breakfast. When are you going for your run? Where are you going for your run? Who are you running with? Where are you going to meet them? How long are you going to be running for? What do you need right after the run? Do you have any other obligations during the day? Where are you going to get lunch? What would you like for lunch? Because as you start to get nervous, sometimes your hunger kind of dissipates a little bit. And you're like, I'm not really hungry for anything. Plan ahead. What's something that you can eat even when you don't feel hungry? Because even though you may not feel hungry, you need to eat. Where are you going to have dinner? Do they take reservations? Because if it's a race weekend, I would look into that. Guess what? You're not the only one thinking of going to that Italian restaurant. See if they have reservations. If they don't, maybe stop by early in the day and say, when do you think it's going to get busy? How long do you think we'd have to be here? Maybe somebody can, take turns and they can wait and put in that name. So when you get there, you can sit down. Do they have a place to sit down, or do you have to stand and wait? I'll tell you what, there are people who plan ahead and say, guess what? It's standing only. I'm going to go outside and I'm going to wait, and we're going to take turns so I don't have to stand for an hour waiting to sit down to have my pasta. You know what I mean? These are things you want to be thinking about. What about race day? What time do you have to report to the race? Do you have to check in, or do you just go to a paddock? Where are the paddocks? How do you get to the paddocks? Because some of these things, it's like, it's like a labyrinth, of trying to find where to go for the race. At some point you think like either, Jack Nicholson from The Shining is going to be coming around the corner looking for you, or the Minotaur. I mean, it's just hard to navigate where to go. So do the due diligence and figure out where you need to be, when you need to be there, and how long it's going to take to get there. And once again, pop in that word grace. Maybe you're there 5-10 minutes earlier. That's okay. Ask, do they have access to bathrooms? Is there going to be water there? Is it chilly? Is there a place to leave clothes? If not, can you go somewhere and find maybe some clothes that on the cheap you can get rid of? I know a lot of these marathons now, they take the clothes that are thrown off at the starting lines and they go to Goodwill organizations. They go to places where they can give them to people that will benefit from having those things. Look into stuff like that. These are all things you can do ahead of time. You can figure out where you need to be, when you need to be there, not the day of. You can do it ahead of time. You can anticipate these things so you're prepared and you're ready. Things like sleep. Okay, hotel rooms. I normally can sleep very well in a hotel room, but I also know that not all hotel rooms are the same. Some, you try to shut the blinds and there's still like no way that you can bring these curtains together, and there's just massive light coming into the room. And if you can't sleep with a pretty significant light pouring onto your face, do you need a sleep mask? Do you need a noise machine? Do you have an alarm set? Because you're not going to rely on the alarm at the hotel, are you? Do you have a backup alarm set? Do you have someone that's going to call you in the morning so you know you're going to wake up so you can go to sleep, not worrying about whether or not the one alarm that's attached to a clock from 1964 in the wall of, your hotel is going to go off. These are things that are going to help you sleep better. Okay? These are things I want you to be thinking about. Your gear. Pack your gear, yes, ahead of time, yes. If you're like me, 3 times, because I end up taking it out. Did I put my jersey in there? Are my spikes in there? Are my flats in there? I do that like so many times. But more importantly, in the weeks leading up to the race, make sure you've worn all this stuff. If you're doing something like a half marathon or a marathon, once those long runs start to get kind of long, they're practice, baby. They're practice for race day. They're practice to wear the gear that you're going to wear, the shoes that you're going to wear when you're going to run. If you know that your marathon starts at 7, your long runs for the last 5 or 6 weeks should be at 7. Get used to that habit of waking up, eating early in the morning, and being prepared to go at 7. Know what you like to eat the night before so you are ready to go at 7. These are the things that you can practice in the weeks leading up. So when it's race day, it feels like another day. Just another day. There's less stress associated with just another day. And this is the thing. Stress is going to be a part of anything when you're trying to do. Stress is always going to be a part of an attempt you're making to do something great, to do something extraordinary, a chance or an opportunity to do something better than you've ever done before, okay? What you're trying to do, though, is not erase all the stress. That's not going to happen. What you're trying to do is lessen the stress, because too much stress for too long becomes strain, and strain is exhausting. So what you're trying to do is plan ahead with so much of these logistics, so you're lessening the amount of stress that's associated with something that's naturally stressful. You're trying to take the stress and not let it become a strain and weaken you, rob energy that you would like to use towards your goal. All right? All right. Next, know thyself. I hinted at it earlier. I mentioned it, that my assumption is you've done the work, so you show up on the starting line with the possibility, the potential to achieve your goals. And what I really mean by that is know thyself. Know your training. So hopefully you kept that training log. Know what you've done. Hopefully you've been paying attention over the course of these weeks or months to your training and where you're at. If you're someone like is, in a season, know the difference between early season and who you are in week 1 and who you're going to be in week 11 during championship season, and the expectations that you can have of what you're going to do and how you're going to be able to do it and how it's going to feel in week 1 compared to week 11. You need to know yourself. Yes, that means your training. It means your strengths. Know what your strengths are. Know what your weaknesses are. Because I'll tell you what, you can anticipate when those weaknesses are going to rear their ugly little heads, and you can mitigate those weaknesses by anticipating them. For me, I think I've mentioned in past ones, I had issues early in my career with hills. I was just terrible. They would psych me out. So if I knew there was a hill coming up, I would anticipate that hill coming up, and I would consciously work on calming down, not getting riled up, not getting tense, and not acting like an idiot on the uphill to compensate for the fact that I had no confidence. And it didn't make me a great hill runner, but it made me a better one. And that weakness was less of a weakness. I'm not going to say it was a strength yet, but it didn't damage me like it used to, because I anticipated, hey, this is where I normally screw up. This is a weakness of mine. How can I mitigate those things? So know your strengths, know your weaknesses, and take advantage of both of them. And be honest. Be honest with yourself. I hear people all the time when they're not ready to do something that they wanted to do say, I'm going to still try to do it. And I say, well, let me get this straight. You missed a lot of time, right? Yes, I did. I missed a lot of time from sickness or injury, whatever. Travel, work got in the way, life got in the way, school got in the way, whatever. But the goal I had 8 weeks ago, I'm going to keep. And I would say, okay, so that goal you said 8 weeks ago was under the premise that you did all the work, everything worked out well, training was really smooth, you were ready to rock and roll, right? Yes. Okay. Well, let's change the goal because you've changed the training. And there's just like silence. Like, well, what do you mean? Well, change the goal because we changed the training. If your training went way, 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 way better than you had anticipated, instead of you getting sick and injured, wouldn't we have changed the goal? Wouldn't we have made the goal like a faster pace or a better place? They'd say, yeah, of course. Okay, well, if the training doesn't go as well as we want, if we have issues like sickness or injury or lots of missed time, then we should be honest, which is code for being really smart, and we should adjust our goals. So be honest with yourself. Sometimes what that means is you are changing your goal and backing off a little bit. Sometimes it means you're pushing forward a little bit. All right, it's not always a negative. Sometimes it's a positive. But I think if you're being honest, it's always a positive. And you're setting yourself up for success. Because if you put a goal out there that is your goal, that you can own based on your fitness, then that's a great goal. It's always a great goal. Now, all that being said, you got to be open to failure. You got to be open to failure on race day. You have to be. Because if you're open to failure on race day, then you're open to real success. I don't think real success can be guaranteed. I don't. Like it's like someone who's, you see people on the street when they're doing like the cups and the balls, and they try, and a lot of times they know where it is, and there's a little trick to it. So they know you're going to lose. I don't think them winning is success if they've played it where there's no way for you to experience anything but failure. Like, I'm sorry, there has to be the possibility of failure for there to be a possibility of real success. You have to be okay with that. You can't be afraid of that. If anything, embrace it. Embrace it as a possibility. Because if you can do that, you're going to realize there is a possibility of real success. And I'll tell you what, this is where you can refer to yourself as brave and courageous. It's not guaranteed success that makes somebody brave. Okay? It's not. And there's no such thing as somebody who's always fearless. If you're always fearless, you're an idiot, all right? Fear's a real thing, and it's not something that you should never have, okay? What I'm saying is, if there's an opportunity for failure, a real possibility of failure coming up short, all right, then you are badass for taking that on to try to achieve success, to try to get to where you want to get, knowing you may not get there. That's badass. That's epic. That's extraordinary. And that's why a lot of people don't cross starting lines, because they can't wrap their arms around failure. They don't ever want to fail. But that's why you will never succeed to where you could, because you can't get that far with guaranteed success. You can only stay where you're at. There is nothing out of reach with guaranteed success. You are stuck where you're at. And that's not what running is about. Running is about progression. Running is about moving forward. Running is about striding ahead. That's what it's about. So be open to failure. I'm not saying try to fail. So that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying there's a possibility you might fail. Rock and roll. Let's go. All right. I would also say this. There is a really good chance at some point in the race you're going to struggle. And here's my message to you when you get to that point. Because, like I said, if you're really reaching for something extraordinary, it's not going to be easy. It's not. All right? So when you get to that part where you're struggling, which, as you've heard me say, I imagine, before, struggling during a race or during life is not proof of failure. It is proof of successfully not giving up. When you get there, you tell yourself, this is exactly where I want to be. The struggling is not proof of going off course. It is proof of being on the right track, because it means you're trying to do something great, and it's hard. It is hard. You are trying to break a mold that you are in right now, so you can have a greater mold next time that you will also try to break through. So when you're struggling, remind yourself, this is exactly where I want to be. I'm doing exactly what I want to do, and I'm in the right place at the right time, and this is proof of it. I'm struggling. And then run with some joy, because you know you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. That's what I want you to do if you get to a point where you're struggling. All right? So just tuck that in there for when it happens, okay? And I guess the last thing I would tell you here if you're trying to put this all together to give yourself the best opportunity to have a great race day, is on race day, when you're on the starting line, what I want you to know is what every coach knows. The hardest part is not race day. The hardest part is getting to race day. That's the hardest part. Day one is always the most nerve-wracking for a coach because we see the entire thing out in front of us. The 10 weeks or 20 weeks or 6 months out ahead of us, and we think, how are we ever going to navigate all of this? How are we going to get all of this work done? How are we going to get from this starting line to that ultimate starting line that's circled on the calendar? So when you are there, just know what you've done is truly extraordinary. The hardest part is getting to where you're at that moment, the starting line on race day. Take a deep breath. Be proud of what you've done. Be proud of all of the starting lines you crossed to get to that starting line. And then, give your best. That's it. That's it. Now, that's it for me, but that's not it for us because we've got a Mindset Minute. Oh yeah, Mindset Minute for episode 71 with the one, the only, Mindset Performance Coach Extraordinaire, the one and the only. Have I said the one and the only like 3 times now? Jeez, I'm getting redundant. Point is, Coach Tammie of the Show Up Society is here to give us a Mindset Minute. So, baton passed. Coach, take it away.
One way I like to try to do my best, whether it's in a race or somewhere else, is to check in with myself and get curious and ask questions. So when you are in a race and you want to race your best, try asking yourself something like, am I a little too comfortable here? Can I push myself a little bit? Can I just stay with this crazy dude in the orange shorts next to me for a little bit longer? Or maybe I'll ask, what do I need here? What does my body need? Do I need to ease up a little bit and regroup and focus on my breathing and calm down? Or does my body feel ready to rock and roll and push it just a little bit? And all of these questions will help you do your best in an event, but they will also help you do your best when you're training. And then if you train better, you're going to race better. So these questions are kind of good to ask yourself at any time. Oh, I just remembered one more really important question to ask yourself. Ask yourself, am I talking to myself in a way that feels good? And if you're not, change it.
Okay, there we go. Another incredible Mindset Minute with Coach Tammie. I'm going to put up all her information in the show notes so you can check out how you can listen to her podcast, how you can follow her on her social media. If you want to work with her, I'll put that link in there too so you can go to her website and you can see all the different ways that you can work with her. So thank you, Coach, for that. Thank you, everyone, for listening. And if you're someone who is racing or competing or has a big day, big event, big moment in their life coming up, just remember, you got this, okay? You got this. Hopefully, you know that now. After this episode, there are some things that you can do to prepare for in anticipation of that day, that moment, so you can be ready to give your best, to try your best. And thank you for listening to this episode of the podcast. Thank you, everyone, for sharing, rating, reviewing. I appreciate it as always. And if you're out in Chicago, I will see you there. If you're at a cross-country meet, maybe I'll see you there too, because I'm all over the place. Point is, thank you for listening. And until next time, take care of yourself, take care of each other, and I'll meet you on the next starting line. Thank you so much for listening to Coach Bennett's podcast today. And if you're not already following or subscribed to the podcast on whatever platform you're listening, well, I really wish you would because it helps a lot. Also, check out the show notes because you'll find a link to Coach Bennett's newsletter, as well as all the social media sites that I'm on. Places like Threads and Facebook and Instagram and Mastodon and YouTube and even the artist formerly known as Twitter, whatever that dumpster fire is called today. You'll find a link to it because I'm on there. Thank you so much again for listening, and until next time, take care of yourself.